of you, I started life as a little kid. How many of you started life as a little kid? About half of you. As a little kid, I always had a fascination with doing the impossible. The week before my 21st birthday, two things happened in one day that would change my life forever. Then in 2001, I discovered the secret for actually doing the impossible from a very unlikely source. But today is a day I've been looking forward to for many years, because today is a day I'm going to actually attempt to do the impossible right before your very eyes, right here at TEDxYerevan. And I'm going to prove to you that the impossible is not impossible. And I'm going to show you that you can do the impossible in your life. But I'm going to need your help. I need you all to close your eyes and think back to when you were a little kid. What were your biggest dreams as a little kid? Where did you want to go? What did you want to do? Who did you want to be? Did you ever want to do something really remarkable with your life and change the world? Did you ever want to really do the impossible? Now think back to your greatest fears. What were your greatest fears that kept you from following your dreams? Now open your eyes. In my quest to do the impossible, I found that there are two things that are universal among people around the world. Like a double-edged sword, everyone has fears and everyone has dreams. In my calling as a sword swallower, I get asked two questions every day. How do you do it? How many of you'd like to know how sword swallowing works? Okay? That's the second most common question I get, but the number one question I get is not how, but why. 3 words: dodgeball, Superman, and mosquito. On October 4th, 2007, my heart was racing, my knees were shaking as I stepped foot on stage at the legendary Sanders Theater at Harvard University to accept the 2007 Ig Nobel Prize in Medicine for a little medical research paper I co-wrote, thank you, a little medical research paper I co-wrote called Sword Swallowing and Its Side Effects. That was published in a little magazine I'd never read before, the British Medical Journal. Now, for someone like me, that was an unexpected surprise, an impossible dream come true, an honor I would never, ever forget. But it wasn't the most memorable day of my life. October 4th, 1967, this scared, shy, skinny, wimpy kid stepped in front of his class. His heart was racing, his knees were shaking. He opened his mouth to speak. He stood there, paralyzed in panic, terrified in tears, sick to his stomach, frozen in fear. This scared, shy, skinny, wimpy kid suffered from extreme fears. He had fear of the dark. He had fear of spiders and snakes. Any of you? He had fear of water and sharks. Anyone? He had a fear of heights. Anyone? He had so many fears, he even had a fear of widths. He was afraid of doctors and nurses and dentists and needles and drills and sharp objects, but more than anything, he had a fear of people. That scared, shy, skinny, wimpy kid suffered from fear of failure and rejection, fear of low self-esteem, and something we didn't even know they had a name for back then, something called social anxiety disorder. That scared, shy, skinny, wimpy kid was me. Because I had fears, the bullies would tease me and beat me up. They would shame me, like Laura talked about earlier. They used to laugh and call me names. They never let me play in any of their reindeer games. Okay, there was one game they let me play in. I don't know if you play it here in Armenia, dodgeball. And I was not a good dodger. The bullies would call my name, and I'd look up, and I'd see those pink dodgeballs hurtling at my face at supersonic speed, and I'd think, why is that pink dot getting bigger? And then it hit me. Bam! 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 And I remember many days walking home from school. My face was red and stinging. My ears were red and ringing. My eyes were burning with tears, and their words were burning in my ears. And whoever said sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me, it's a lie. Words can cut like a knife. Words can pierce like a sword. Words can make wounds that are so deep they can't be seen. So I had fears, and words were my worst enemy. But I also had dreams. I would run home and I'd escape the Superman comics, and I dreamed I wanted to be a superhero like Superman. I wanted to be a man of steel. I wanted to fight for truth and justice. I wanted to fight against villains and kryptonite. I wanted to fly around the world doing superhuman feats and saving lives. And I had a fascination with things that were real. So I would read Ripley's Believe It or Not book and Guinness Book of World Records. Any of you read any of those? And I saw real people doing real feats. And I said, if the bullies won't let me play in their sports games, I vowed I wanted to do real magic, real feats, do things the bullies could not do that the other kids could not do. I wanted to prove the impossible was not impossible. Fast forward 10 years, it was April of 1978. I was 20 years old. It was a week before my 21st birthday. Two things happened in one day that would change my life forever. It was a hot day, 40 degrees Celsius outside, humid, muggy day in Tamil Nadu, South India, where I was living as a missionary. And my mentor, Greg Ormson, said to me, he said, do you have thrones, Daniel? I said, thrones? What are thrones? Greg said, thrones are major life goals, like thriving on hopes and dreams, like a bucket list. He said, if you could go any place you wanted to go, be anything you wanted to be, do anything you wanted to do, where would you go, what would you do, who would you be? I said, no, man, I can't do that. I'm too scared. I've got too many fears. That night, I took my little rice mat up on the roof of the bungalow. It was 40 degrees Celsius out, hot night, and I stretched my little rice mat out on the roof, and I laid out to watch the bats dive bombing for mosquitoes. And all I could think about was thrones and dreams and hopes and those bullies with the dodgeballs. A few hours later, I woke up. My heart was racing. My knees were shaking. But this time, it was not with fear. My entire body was convulsing, wet with sweat. My brain was burning up with a 40-degree malaria fever. And for the next 5 days, I was in and out of consciousness on my deathbed, fighting for my life. My brain burning up, my body convulsing. And whenever I was conscious, all I could think about was thrones. What did I want to do with my life if I could make it to my 21st birthday? Finally, on the night before my 21st birthday, in a moment of clarity, I came to a realization. I realized that little teeny tiny mosquito, Anopheles stevensii, that little mosquito that weighed less than 5 micrograms, if that mosquito could take out an 80-kilo man, then I knew that mosquito was my kryptonite. And then I thought, no, it's not the mosquito. It's even smaller than that. It's that little parasite inside the mosquito, Plasmodium falciparum, that infects 120 million people a year, kills 1 million people a year, and has killed more people on the face of this earth than any other disease since the beginning of time. That's the diabolical victim I need to fight. Then I thought, no, it's even smaller than that. But to me, it seemed so much greater. I realized that fear was my kryptonite, my parasite, that had crippled and paralyzed me my entire life. And you know, there's a difference between danger and fear. Danger is real. Fear is a choice. And I realized I had a choice. I could either live in fear and die a failure, or I could face my fears, put my fears to death, and dare to live, reach for my dreams. You know, there's something about being on your deathbed and really makes you appreciate life. I realized it's in dying that we live. It's at the edge of death that begins the point of life. Everyone dies. Not everyone really lives. Learn to die, dare to live. So that night I changed my story. I chose a different story for my life. I decided I wanted to live. So I prayed a little prayer and I said, God, if you'll let me live till my 21st birthday, I will not let fear rule my life any longer. I'm going to put my fear to death. I'm going to take on risks and challenges. I want to find my purpose and calling. I want to know my life has meaning. I want to do something remarkable with my life, reach for my dreams, and change the world. I want to prove the impossible is not impossible. Now, I won't tell you if I survived until my 21st birthday or not. I'll let you figure that out for yourself. But that night, my life changed completely. For the next 7 years, I lived on a little deserted island in the Bahamas by myself, the original survivor, in a thatch hut, wearing a loincloth, spearing sharks and stingrays to eat. Then for 2 years, I lived on a cruise ship as a scuba instructor. Then from there, I moved to Pujo Pungo in Ecuador in the Amazon rainforest. From there, I moved to Nashville, where I worked in the music business, moved to Stockholm, Sweden, where I worked in the music business, went all the way up to the Arctic Circle and climbed to the top of Mount Kebnekaise, the highest mountain in Sweden, high above the Arctic Circle. 2 years ago, I got to see Mount Everest at sunrise. It was awesome. And this morning, driving in here, guess what I saw outside the window? Mount Ararat for the first time. I checked it off my list. And I learned circus clowning, I learned juggling, fire eating, glass eating, stilt walking, unicycle riding, and in 1997, I heard there were less than a dozen sword swallowers left in the entire world. And I said, I've got to do that. And I met a sword swallower, 7'3", George the Giant, and I asked him for some tips. I said, give me some tips. He said, I'll give you 2 tips. Number 1, it's extremely dangerous. That's why people have died doing it. That's why there's less than a dozen sword swallowers left. Number 2, don't try it. Guess what I did? I added it to my list of throws. And I began practicing, and I practiced 10 to 12 times a day, every day for 4 years, a total of about 13,000 unsuccessful attempts before I got my first sword down my throat in 2001. Then I set a throne to become the world's leading expert in sword swallowing, and I networked all those sword swallowers together. I found each of those 12 sword swallowers, searched out every book, magazine, newspaper article, medical report on sword swallowing, studied anatomy, physiology, talked with doctors and nurses, networked all the sword swallowers together into the Sword Swallowers Association, and conducted a 2-year medical research paper that was published in the British Medical Journal that won the 2007 Ig Nobel Prize in Medicine. Sword swallowing started 4,000 years ago back in ancient India, where I first witnessed it as a 20-year-old kid. Over the past 150 years, sword swallowers have been used in the fields of medicine and science to help develop things such as the rigid endoscope, the fluoroscope, the rigid endoscope in 1868 by Dr. Adolf Kussmaul using a sword swallower, electrocardiogram on a sword swallower in 1906, the fluoroscope and X-rays, bronchioscopes. Over those same 150 years, we know of hundreds of injuries and 29 deaths, including this sword swallower who impaled his heart with his sword in London. We found that there are from 3 to 8 serious injuries each year that require hospitalization, and that it takes some sword swallowers, what takes only a few seconds to perform, takes from 3 to 10 years to learn and a lifetime to master. But the fascinating thing I learned about sword swallowing was how sword swallowers actually do the impossible. And here's your take home. Don't focus on that 99.9% that's impossible. Instead, focus on that 0.1% that's plausible and figure out how to make it possible. The impossible is only impossible until it's not. So now let me take you on a little journey. Thank you. Let me take you on a little journey into the mind of a sword swallower. What goes through a sword swallower's mind while 2 feet of steel is going through his body. In order to swallow a sword, it requires mind over matter meditation, razor-sharp concentration, pinpoint accuracy in order to overcome automatic subconscious body reflexes and to create reinforced brain synapses in the mind through repeated muscle memory by deliberate practice of over 10,000 times in order to impale my body of flesh and blood with a sword of solid steel. Now let me take you on a journey into the body of a sword swallower. Now I want you to imagine you're going to swallow a sword. So first you lick the blade, you can taste the metallic taste of that cold hard steel. Then you slide it into your mouth. When you get to the back of your throat, you repress the gag reflex in the back of the throat, slide it down the esophagus, find the proper alignment into the epiglottis, flip open the epiglottis, slide the blade down into the thoracic chamber between the lungs. When you get to the heart, you actually have to nudge the heart aside. The esophagus makes a juncture around the heart. So you nudge the heart aside and you can feel the blade beating on your heart, on the cold hard steel. Then you slide the blade past the diaphragm, through the diaphragm, relax the lower esophageal sphincter, slide the blade past the liver and kidneys, down into the stomach, all the way down to the bottom of the stomach, repress the Rett reflex in the stomach, all the way down to the duodenum. If I were to go further than that, all the way down to my fallopian tubes. Let me tell you how sword swallowing has changed my life about living my life and cutting through fear. I found that when I'm on the edge of death is when I feel the most alive. See, I risk my life at the point of a knife, but it's at the edge of death that courage comes alive. People often say, it must take courage to risk your life and nudge your heart and swallow a sword. No. What takes real courage is for that scared, shy, skinny, wimpy kid to risk failure and rejection, to bare his heart, swallow his pride, and stand up here on a TEDx stage in front of a bunch of total strangers and tell you his simple story of his fears and dreams, to risk spilling his guts, both literally and figuratively. Thank you. You see, I always wanted to do the impossible, and now I am. I always wanted to do something really remarkable with my life, and now I am. But the remarkable thing is not swallowing swords. The remarkable thing is that I can swallow 21 swords at once, or swallow swords underwater in a tank of 88 sharks and stingrays for Ripley's Believe It or Not, or swallow a sword heated at 1,500 degrees red hot for Stan Lee's Superhumans as a Man of Steel, or to make it on the finals of America's Got Talent, or to swallow a sword and pull a 3,900-pound car out of Ripley's Believe It or Not, or to win the Ig Nobel Prize in medicine. No, that's not the really remarkable thing. None of those are. The really remarkable thing is that God could take that scared, shy, skinny, wimpy kid who is afraid of heights and water and sharks and doctors and nurses and sharp objects, and now he's got me flying around the world at heights of 30,000 feet, swallowing sharp objects underwater in tanks of sharks, and speaking to doctors and nurses and audiences like you at TEDx around the world. Thank you. You see, I always wanted to do the impossible, and now I am. I always wanted to do something remarkable with my life, and now I am. I always wanted to fly around the world doing superhuman feats and saving lives, and now I am. But you know what? There's still a small part of that little kid's big dream deep inside. Thank you. And you know, I always wanted to find my purpose and calling, and now I've found it. But it's not what you think it is. It's not in swallowing the swords, my strengths. It's actually in wielding my weakness, wallowing in my words. You see, my purpose and calling is to change the world by cutting through fear, one sword at a time, one word at a time, one knife at a time, one life at a time, to inspire others to be superheroes and do the impossible in their lives. My purpose is to help others find theirs. What's yours? What's your purpose? What's your calling? What were you put here to do? I believe we're all called to be superheroes and save our planet. What is your superpower? What is your story? What is your long walk? Tell your story. Dare to dream. Dare to live. Dare to risk. Dare to live on the edge. For all those bullies with the dodgeballs, or those kids who said I'd never be able to do the impossible, never be able to do anything or amount to anything, I've got just one thing to say to you. Thank you. Because if it wasn't for bullies, if it wasn't for villains, we wouldn't have superheroes. Thank you. I found that actions speak louder than words. I'm here to prove to you the impossible is not impossible. This is extremely dangerous. It could kill me. I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to need your help with this.